Senator Lisa Murkowski claims she agrees with Tea Party Patriots' action that only American citizens should vote and that voters should present identification. But then she wrote an entire op-ed in the Wall Street Journal explaining why she is voting no on a bill that does exactly that. She claims the Save America Act will create difficulties for Alaskans, but we will show you how Alaska's Division of Elections is actually disenfranchising legal voters and citizens in the 49th state, and how the Save America Act can enforce the law and right several illegalities. Let's turn Senator Murkowski's no vote into a yes vote. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show. I'm Jenny Beth Martin.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Let me start where the senator and I agree, because we do agree on a lot. 84% of Americans believe you should prove you are a citizen before you register to vote, and that includes most Democrats. That number comes directly from McLaughlin and Associate polling. Senator Murkowski is absolutely correct that the free and fair elections are the cornerstone of our constitutional republic. And she's right that Alaska is unique. It is a state twice the geographic size of Texas with whole communities that have no roads. So I do understand Murkowski's arguments about the difficulty of travel given the rugged, wild terrain of the massive state and their unique weather. But several of her claims about this bill are just wrong, and Alaskans and Americans deserve an accurate version. The Save America Act does not end online voter registration. It keeps it, and the text says so. It does not force anyone registered to vote to re-register or to dig up a birth certificate. Everyone on the rolls today is grandfathered into the voter rolls. It applies only to new registrations going forward. And a passport is not required. A passport is only one of several accepted documents. A birth certificate or naturalization certificate would also work. And a woman who is recently married or divorced does not lose her vote waiting on new paperwork because the bill lets her sign an affidavit attesting to her prior name. The senator offers three vivid examples: an 18-year-old in Savoonga, an 85-year-old native elder born before statehood, and a fisherman in Unalaska. So let's look at each one of these. The bill already says a citizen who cannot provide documentary proof of citizenship may attest under penalty of perjury and submit other evidence for an official review. So the teenager in Savoonga is not flying anywhere. The elder, if she is already registered to vote, does not have to do a single thing because she would be grandfathered into the voter registration rolls. If the elder has moved and must re-register, Alaska has kept birth certificates since 1913, and the state has a procedure to issue birth certificates for exactly these kind of home births, which she could order by mail or online without leaving her community. And the fisherman in Unalaska, who the senator says would have to go 800 miles to the nearest option. A state-authorized DMV office was operating right there in Unalaska earlier this year in January and February, processing tags and titles. And that same kind of office could be set up to process driver's licenses in the future. Also, Unalaska has a public library, which is one of the places Alaskans can register to vote. So a process to register to vote could be set up in that library if it isn't already there in the first place. Did you know that 49 residents are paid to live in Alaska? Now, I'm asking you this because it's actually a crucial piece that the senator is leaving out, and I think it's the entire linchpin of our argument today. Alaska pays U.S. citizens and permanent residents, in other words, legal aliens, every year from the oil pipeline as long as a person resides in the state of Alaska for more than half a year. It's called the Permanent Fund Dividend, and more than 8 in 10 Alaskans apply for it every year. To get the dividend, Alaskan U.S. citizens must either initially show up in person or mail an original birth certificate, a passport, or naturalization certificate. Also, non-citizens show their legal resident immigration documentation. If they choose to mail it in, once the state finishes reviewing the documents, the state mails it back to them in a stamped, self-addressed returned envelope. Each year, Alaskans apply for that year's permanent fund dividend payment, but they don't have to show proof of citizenship or their immigration status each time they do this every year. In other words, they submit proof of citizenship only once when they initially apply for the funds, and each year thereafter, they fill out a shorter form detailing how many days they lived in Alaska that year without continuing to show proof of citizenship or proof of legal residency. It's very much like the SAVE Act, require proof of citizenship for voter registration, but a simple voter ID to cast ballots. The very system the senator calls impossible, a system to provide proof of citizenship, already exists and reaches every single village she is worried about. Alaska offers automatic voter registration for eligible voters, but instead of doing it during the driver's license sign-up the way most states in the lower 48 do, they do it through the annual permanent fund dividend application process. Now, here's the problem, and it's the one thing that the Save America Act fixes. Since Alaska registers people to vote as part of the annual permanent fund application, they seem to be registering non-citizens who apply for the payment annually. And you don't have to take my word for it. Take a look at Alaska's own election website. As it warns, and I'm quoting them here, just because you received a voter identification card does not mean you are a U.S. citizen. And then it tells non-citizens who got registered to vote anyway to please call and cancel themselves. Alaska registers people first and then asks the non-citizens to fix it later. It even has a frequently asked question and answer for the question, why did I receive a voter registration card if I'm not a U.S. citizen? That is the exact problem the bill, the Save America Act, is working to solve. And it's sitting right there in Senator Murkowski's own backyard. Now, here's where I do extend my hand, because the senator's strongest concerns are legitimate and every single one of them can be fixed with an amendment instead of a no vote. First, Alaska's geography. Let's write Alaska's own dividend model into the bill so Alaskans can send proof of citizenship by mail. If the process is good enough for Alaska to send a dividend payment check, it can be good enough to register those same Alaskans to vote. So we can make an exception for Alaskans given their geography and their weather and incorporate the proof of citizenship the way that they are already doing for the permanent fund dividend. Second, the timeline. She raises concerns about the timeline being able to be implemented quickly around the country. Arizona and Wyoming already require proof of citizenship, so do several other states. For them, the Save America Act is going to be nearly instantaneous. Alaska is better positioned than most states, not worse, to begin requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote because of the way they're already collecting the same kind of documentation for their permanent fund dividend. So let's start the clock now and give reasonable grace to any state that genuinely needs more time. Third, honest election workers. If the text needs a narrow fix to protect an honest clerk who makes an honest mistake while handling voter registration applications, While we still hold deliberate bad actors accountable, then let's write that into the bill. That's called legislating. And Majority Leader Thune could look for ways to implement these items into the bill if it's a concern of Senator Murkowski. Likewise, she could lobby more forcefully and look for a way to make a deal to address these concerns rather than simply objecting to the entire bill that would, when the bill is simply designed to enforce federal law and her own state admits they're registering non-citizens to vote on their election division website. So Senator Murkowski, I understand you filed amendments because you want this done right. Well, I want it done right too. And Tea Party Patriots Action has spent the last 2.5 years working on this bill. We drove a bus through 20 states to build support for it. And I've stood in your home state to make the case for it. I'm not asking you to abandon Alaska. I'm asking you to help us write a version that works for Alaska and also works for the rest of America, and then to vote yes. Only American citizens should vote in American elections. So let's finish the job together, Senator Murkowski. Now, you who are listening in the audience today, here's what I need you to do right now today, while Congress is still in town and before they leave for their August recess. And remember, 50 senators have already agreed with us and voted in favor of the House-backed version of the Save America Act. Call the Capitol switchboard, and that number is 202-224-3121. Ask for each of your senators and tell them, especially if they're a Republican senator, to go talk to Senator Murkowski about the concerns and the solutions I just presented, and to tell your senators not merely to give lip service supporting the Save America Act, but to figure out how they can get the votes so we can get this enacted into law. We expect them to pass this bill into law. In addition to the Save America, so that's what you need to do, all right? Make sure that you are making those phone calls right now today to your senators. Now, in addition to the Save America Act, there's so much breaking news, and we've got a lot to cover today. American forces are on their 10th straight night of strikes in Iran, and this week, 2 more American families got a knock on the door because their loved ones have been killed in action. A man set fire to a federal building full of immigration courts in New York City. The Democratic Socialists of America just put out a platform to abolish the United States Senate and the Electoral College. And a Senate seat in South Carolina was empty for barely a week, and now has 2 people running to fill it. We have 2 outstanding guests to walk us through all of it. My friend and co-host, Robert McNeily, is going to steer the show today because I am leaving and headed to Washington, D.C. to continue fighting for the Save America Act on your behalf. Robert, welcome to the show, and thank you for stepping in for me today. The show's yours.
Thank you, Jenny Beth. I'm Robert McNeily, and I'll be your host for the rest of the hour. What a story to break here at the Jenny Beth Show. It's another big July Tuesday in America, and President Trump meeting with President Joseph Aoun of Lebanon in the Oval Office, where he broke news just over 1 hour ago, stating that he is willing to have discussions with Hezbollah. I cannot ask for a better first guest to make sense of a very big news day. Rod Martin is the founder and chief executive of Martin Capital. He's on the founding team of PayPal alongside Peter Thiel, and he advised Governor Mike Huckabee and has spent his whole career thinking about capitalism, technology, and the fight against communism. Rod, thank you for being here on the Jenny Beth Show.
Great to be here.
Let's start with the conflict in Iran because it has this human cost this week that no one should look away from. This is the 10th straight night of American strikes inside Iran, and this is we lost 2 more of our own at a base in Jordan. First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan, 25 years old, from Eva Beach, Hawaii, and Private Isabella Gonzalez, 19 years old, from Carrollton, Texas, just 19. Their dignified transfer at Dover this week postponed. And when you look at where this stands, what does this country actually need to hear right now?
Well, it would help if this country heard the truth about what's going on over there. I mean, we have tragically lost some brave heroes but we've hardly lost any of them compared to any prior war. It's really extraordinary just how incredible our U.S. military is now, and the degree of operations they can take on with almost no casualties. It's just extraordinary. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Iran started what a lot of our friends would call a forever war. You know, they're very concerned that America not get into a forever war. But the truth is, Iran started one 47 years ago that we've mostly declined to fight. That doesn't mean it hasn't gone on. That doesn't mean they haven't murdered American soldiers for decades, and not just soldiers, but civilians as well. Most of the IED deaths in the Iraq conflict were directly attributable to Iran, and it just spirals from there. But you mentioned the Lebanese conflict, and that is worthy of tremendous mention because the Iranians had built what amounted to an extended Iranian empire around the region. First and foremost, you have their proxy armies, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and the one that frequently gets left out is all the pro-Iranian militias wreaking havoc in Iraq for the last 20 years. Now, there's another one that has to be mentioned, which is the entire country of Syria, which under Bashar Assad was just an Iranian client. Everything I just said is either gone or going away. So, I mean, it's just remarkable what's happened in Gaza. Hamas is actually handing over the government to a board that is somewhat subsidiary to Trump's Board of Peace. Will they go away gently? I doubt it, but they're actually dissolving their government. The Lebanese government declared war on Israel in 1948. That's twice as long as the Iranians have been going after us and still are technically at war. But thank you, Marco Rubio. We actually had them in Washington. The Lebanese president, the delegation from Israel, they actually recognized Israel's territorial integrity and sovereignty for the first time in 80 years. Absolutely remarkable, and committed to disarming Hezbollah, which has controlled about 20% of Lebanese territory for decades. It's just absurd. It would be like if some foreign power set up a proxy army on the Mexican border and constantly fired missiles into Brownsville and San Antonio. We would never tolerate that. So that is coming to an end. Assad is gone. We have a pro-U.S. regime in Damascus. We'll see if that lasts. We'll see if those guys are actually with us, but there are good signs so far, and the president is happy. And the new Iraqi president is arresting leaders of the pro-Iran militias and shutting them down. Nobody had that on their bingo card. So we have rolled up the extended Iranian empire. All that is left is what's left of the Iranian forces in Iran. And that's just getting annihilated day by day. This president's going to finish this job, and everyone should be proud of what he's doing. The fact that they aren't tells you they're listening to the normal left-wing propaganda. In the Iraq conflict, we had Baghdad Bob, and he was giving us propaganda every single day that was just 180 degrees from the truth. Now we don't have to have Baghdad Bob. We have NBC, and they're doing the Iranians' work for them. So this is an extraordinary thing that's happening. There is a real possibility of peace in the Middle East for the first time in anybody's living memory, and you can thank Donald Trump.
Yes, and peace through strength, and this amazing cabinet mixed with the ISIS caliphate from Obama and the open border during Joe Biden, a war on two fronts really almost solved. So thank you, Rod, for taking us through that arc of history, because I think people don't remember it every single day. We have a lot on our mind, but President Trump has said plainly that every time Iran kills an American, they will pay for it many times over. Congress has now passed two resolutions trying to order an end to this, and the president kept operating anyway. So walk our viewers through the constitutional reality here, especially with Article 2, is a war powers resolution with no funding attached, anything more than a strongly worded letter from the Congress.
It is a strongly worded letter. That is exactly what it is. And I'm so glad you asked, because I've written a lot about this, both about the constitutional mandate for declarations of war and also the unconstitutionality of the War Powers Act. On the first case, we know, we should know. Conservatives used to know. They don't seem to know anymore that the founding fathers dealt with declarations of war rather differently from some of our more doctrinaire friends today. The founding father presidents fought multiple undeclared wars, constant warfare against various Indian tribes who attacked the United States and its settlers, but also in the Adams and Jefferson administrations, and then later under Madison and Monroe, you have undeclared wars against not just the French, but the Barbary states as well. And all of this goes on under the guys who created the Constitution in the first place. So it would stand to reason that they knew what they meant by their words. It is clear that the founding fathers thought that some military actions demanded a declaration of war and some did not. They were lower level and didn't require it. And that's clear from their actions. And by the way, in one of those cases, James Madison actually asked Congress to declare war on somebody, and they said, no, but here's funding to go fight them. So that's where those guys were. I'm not saying we shouldn't declare war. I'm just saying that the president is on solid constitutional footing here. The War Powers Act, of course, just tries to exercise a legislative veto. That was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1983. It is a strongly worded letter. And despite that, the president is in full compliance with its terms, but he doesn't have to be. And Barack Obama went to war in Libya for 222 days, and Congress didn't say boo. So again, the president is on solid legal ground here.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, my favorite Marine song there, detailing the Pirates of Tripoli, one of our first American wars, and dealing with that in early administrations. But Iran's own government can't keep its story straight, Rod. Their foreign ministry told their own state media that shipping is operating normally, and while the Revolutionary Guard says the strait is effectively closed. Now, meanwhile, gas is back over $4 a gallon right here at home. So what does a strong, sober American position look like from here as we look to end this debacle in the Middle East, thanks to the Iranian regime?
Well, you've got two different things I should address there. The first one being the strait itself. Funny way to close it when the U.S. Navy has gotten 900 commercial vessels through the strait in the last 60 days. I mean, we've moved something like 400 or 500 million barrels of oil through the strait during that time. So no, the Iranians are harassing shipping. They're not blocking it. They have no ability to block it. Their navy is on the bottom of the ocean. The only thing they have is basically a guerrilla tactic. They've got some missiles they can still shoot. They've got some speedboats they can go attack things with. That's fine, but we're just taking them out one after another. And so that's meaningless. What it is meaningful for, however, is the price of oil. And you're right to bring that up because it affects insurance rates on the tankers that do go through the strait. That strait has historically carried 20% of the world's total oil. That's a really big deal. Now, America doesn't use any of it except in California because they're shutting down all their oil fields and refineries, and they're just a disaster area. But aside from the West Coast, this country isn't just self-sufficient, it is dominant. We now outproduce Russia and Saudi Arabia combined. We're the number 3 exporter in the world. We are killing it with liquefied natural gas, or LNG. What that means is not only do we just pump money into Texas and Louisiana and North Dakota and all our other oil producing states, not only is it great for the American economy, not only does it cut our trade deficit, potentially eliminate it, but what it really does is it makes our allies secure. If Japan and Taiwan and Germany and Poland don't have to buy their energy from Russia or Qatar, the whole world is better. And the net result of that won't be a huge price drop in the next 6 weeks, but the net result of that is dramatically lower energy prices over the next 12 to 18 months, some of which we'll see before the election. But the long-term benefit of this is extraordinary, and that is one of the biggest reasons Donald Trump is all over this. This is a legacy thing. He's going to completely remake the energy picture for the entire world and the security picture, and potentially actually bring peace to the Middle East. I'm amazed, honestly.
Yes, promises made, promises kept, and consistency as well. Ever since 2015, President Trump stating when he first ran, Iran will never have that nuclear weapon. He has been so committed to this, and it is peace through strength. So God be with our troops, God be with our president and our entire cabinet as this operation continues. Now, let me turn to what happened in New York City, because this is just chilling, Rod. We had a man pushing a cart up to a federal building full of immigration courtrooms, pouring gasoline, lighting it on fire. We have this video here, just gruesome. He was carrying axes, a machete, and anti-ICE signs, and he's decided to hang out there. 3 people hurt as a result. And here is part of what you can't make up. One of the people he actually injured there, this individual, was an immigrant who had simply shown up that morning for his own immigration hearing. So what does this tell us about when violence supposedly done on behalf of immigrants lands on an immigrant doing everything right?
This has been the Democrat Party's playbook almost since its inception. I mean, you start in the earliest stages of the Democrat Party, you start with a civil war. And I'm a Southerner. I think you can probably hear that in my voice, but we all know who was who. The North was run by Republicans. The South was run entirely by Democrats. And the Democrats went to war basically against the Republican Party to keep their slaves. When that didn't work, after the deaths of 650,000 Americans on both sides, the most awful war of our entire history in terms of death toll and devastation, well, they just started the Ku Klux Klan, and they started lynching people, anybody who got in their way. It's just pure terrorism. These aren't attacks on enemy soldiers. These are attacks on innocent, unarmed civilians. They did that for the next century. Then we get into the 60s and 70s. In the 70s, people have forgotten, but we averaged about 1,500 domestic terror bombings per year in the 1970s. And it's guys like Obama's buddy Bill Ayers, who bombed the Pentagon and walked free. Nobody would prosecute him. And he bragged not only that he did it, but he said his only regret in bombing the Pentagon was he didn't kill more people. And this guy is a leading light of the Democratic Party. So when we see them firebombing Teslas, when we see them having the summer of love in 2020, where they're burning down cities across the country, actually in Portland, where the mayor was helping them, they tried to burn down his apartment complex with him inside it. I mean, these people eat their own. So we're looking at kind of an equivalent of a Maoist cultural revolution. And I am very, very pleased that the president has been very serious about trying to bust up the domestic terror networks that we're dealing with. And by the way, Antifa is one of them. And I'm thrilled that we have indictments against the SPLC, which is just evil. And we now know that because it was actually funding the American Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan to do terroristic things so they could raise money off it and supposedly oppose it. The left is very well organized, and it is totally willing to go to civilian violence, and I want to stress, we have a Pew study from late last year. We have other polling as well. A very large percentage of young Democrats believe political violence is justified. That is not at all like the Republican equivalents, where that number's like 3%. And shame on the 3%, by the way. But the idea that we would have a party that is increasingly dominated by people who literally want to kill you to get their way, that's just terrorism, is very disturbing. And it's something we have to root out.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say Bill Ayers from my hometown and got President Obama started in state Senate politics in Illinois back in 1996. But why was he able to do that as a private citizen? It's because Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, both administrations, pardoning many in the weather underground who did attack the Capitol. So I'm very tired, Rod, of the January 6th timeline and narrative coming from today's Democrats based on their former presidents and the pardons, but I'll let them hopefully clear that up with the media. As Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, running for governor, puts it directly, these officials call ICE a rogue and reckless agency and then act surprised when someone turns those words into a firebomb. Right to your point, Rod, is there a straight line here between this rhetoric and the violence, or is it simply unfair to throw at our brave men and women in uniform?
If it were isolated comments, there wouldn't really be a straight line. People say stuff and sometimes they mean it and sometimes they don't. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you're creating a climate, not any one an entire party is creating a climate with their media allies, with all of the different institutional tools at their disposal that actually glorifies this kind of violence and tells you that it needs to happen. And you don't have to look further than places where liberals hang out to see this. Go to Blue Sky. You'll be like the only person there, except a handful of Democrats, but still go to Blue Sky, which was going to, wipe out Twitter after Elon took it over. And what do you see after Charlie Kirk is assassinated? It is hundreds of thousands of messages about how, well, here's the guys we want to kill next. They're not at all disturbed by the assassination. They're wanting more, and they're talking about it. Now, if that's the climate you live in, if that's what you're marinated in, after a while, a predictable percentage of people are actually going to go shoot somebody or bomb a building or otherwise commit violent acts against innocent people. And by the way, law enforcement officers are innocent people, but it's not just them. They're going after civilians. When you firebomb somebody's Tesla, you're kind of hoping to kill them. Let's be real about this. This has to be dealt with in much the same way that we dealt with the mob in the 50s and the communist infiltration a couple decades before that. You actually have to root this out. We have the legal tools to do so, and I'm very proud of this administration for beginning that effort.
This next question for you, Rod, right in your wheelhouse, is someone who spent decades fighting communism and warning people about this evil ideology. There's a federal grand jury in New York looking at the Neville Roy Singham, this individual most people perhaps won't know about, a wealthy backer of Code Pink and the People's Forum with deep financial ties and even personal ties to the Communist Party of China. Prosecutors are examining whether he illegally funneled money through American nonprofits to push a pro-Beijing message. Now, who is he and why should an ordinary American care about this name?
Singham is a really interesting guy. First and foremost, he's an American. That's interesting since he lives in Shanghai and has for nearly a decade. But Singham is the child of Sri Lankan immigrants who were both explicitly Leninists. I mean, they called themselves Leninists, and that's how Singham grew up, and he agrees with that. He believes in that stuff. So, of course, he's aligned with the Chinese Communist Party. They're the most powerful communist party in the world, and he's a communist. So, but he's a communist who's made an awful lot of money. He had a tech startup that he sold. His part of the sale was almost $1 billion. And since he got that in his hand, he has spent it lavishly to help Chinese communist aligned groups in the United States. He also married the co-founder of Code Pink. So, he's all about that. Code Pink is not known for its peacefulness either. So he's in Shanghai. He's probably out of reach for any kind of arrest if the grand jury comes back with the findings we kind of expect. But the truth is, it's really a good sign that we're going after Neville Roy Singham, because I'm sorry, you go back to 2020, you look at these riots, and in every one of those cities, time after time, you have entire stacks of bricks, pallets of bricks just magically appear in the middle of the night, exactly where they want the rioting to happen. I'm sorry, those are expensive. Normal people didn't do that. There is a massive funding network behind the domestic terrorism we're seeing. And we now know, as I said earlier, that if you're talking about all the right-wing violence that Biden's team hyped up, we now know it was funded by the left too. So when you consider all these things, this is really evil, and it's got to be rolled up. And again, we just convicted a bunch of Antifa guys for murdering, I believe, an ATF officer down there, some federal officer, and we've got this grand jury in the Southern District of New York. We also have, crucially, the grand conspiracy case before the grand jury in the Southern District of Florida, which is all about, did Obama and his team conspire to thwart and potentially overthrow an elected president of the United States? All these things are linked. All these things get thrown together, and we've got multiple cases going forward. So our friends who are like, well, I'll believe it when I see an arrest. Guys, a lot of people have already been arrested. A decent number of them are already in prison. James Comey's been indicted twice. That's about as big as you get. And we are really making progress. But the wheels of justice turn slowly, and this administration is turning them as quickly as it's able.
On one side as well, we have the president declassifying intelligence that China went after the voter files of 220 million Americans. On the other hand, a China-linked funder under a grand jury investigation for money moving into American political causes. So many stories happening. But are these really separate, Rod, or are they the same story, as you beautifully linked with the last answer? What's happening here might be really a criminal conspiracy against the person who was a citizen, became president of the United States.
Yeah, this is all connected. And what we know in this Chinese election interference, I won't call it a case because it's several cases. We know that we found at least 60,000 fake ballots printed on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party for the California elections. If we found 60,000, there are more. And nobody prints 60,000 of anything just for funnies. Oh, we have some extra money to spend. We'll make some fake ballots. This was for a purpose. Likewise, the voting machines out there, we now know that the data was being processed in China, which is illegal. And so the Chinese Communist Party had the ability to manipulate the results of elections in this country in real time. The newly declassified documents the president was talking about in primetime air on at least some networks are really damning. I mean, the Chinese went after 220 million voter files. Well, why the heck would you do that? You don't do it in isolation. And it's true that they can get some of that freely available. You just pay the fee to the clerk's office or the Secretary of State. But that's not what they did. They actually hacked election systems to get a lot of this data. If they can get that data, they can get the rest, and they can manipulate it. So yes, some of that is for influence operations. Some of that is to be able to flip votes. Have they actually done it? Well, of course, let's just all be Pollyanna and say that no election fraud ever happens. But I remember when Kamala Harris in 2019 was introducing legislation to ban voting machines because they were inherently hackable. She was calling for paper ballots until she got on Joe Biden's ticket. And all of a sudden that went completely away. So both parties have understood this vulnerability, but one of the parties is now exploiting the heck out of it.
Yes, and the Baker and Carter Commission helped us with that in a bipartisan way to show how mail-in balloting and all these other practices that are now regular in our elections have really harmed the process. Before we go to a break, let's do a quick lap around the map because the country is holding a run of consequential races, and I want your read on this fast because you have Arizona, Missouri, Wyoming voters going to the polls today, and in Maine, Troy Jackson has all but locked up the Democrat Senate nomination to challenge Susan Collins. In South Carolina, Senator Darlene Graham filed today to keep the seat her late brother held, and 2 sitting House Republicans are running against her even after the president endorsed Senator Graham. Now, and in Michigan, it's Abdul El Sayed against Haley Stevens with nearly $30 million of outside money pouring in. So, Rod, one sentence here. What's the race that tells us the most about where this country is headed?
They're all important, and I think the Republicans are going to do well in general. I don't think South Carolina tells us anything. I mean, the president's already said he's for her, and so, you know, she's Graham's sister. She's going to win that. I think the main race is going to be very interesting because I think Collins pulls it out, but it's going to be a tough race. It's always a tough race. And her opponent, no matter who they pick, is a Marxist. I mean, they aren't nominating moderates in Maine. They're just not doing that now. And of course, in Michigan, you actually do have this much more fascinating race on the Democrat side with a much more traditional moderate, if you can call any Democrat moderate, but you know, someone who is not horribly to the left of Bill Maher running against a real Marxist. You know, Said is an Islamist Marxist. He's just terrible. And no, he has avoided actually joining the Democratic Socialists of America. Good on him. But they're endorsing him, and all of their buddies are endorsing him. So we know exactly where he stands. Can Mike Rogers win the general? I don't know. Michigan's tough, but clearly we can win there. Trump certainly has. So barring fraud, I think we've got a reasonably even playing field. I think Rogers has a shot at winning it. He's a bit of an underdog, but I think he can win. And it'll be interesting to see who the Democrats put up against him. Increasingly, they are very clearly leaning hard left. And we're not talking left like, well, you know, there's not that much difference between the parties in America. Well, first of all, yes, there is. But we're not talking about Bill Clinton Democrats. We're talking about Alinskyite at best and Islamist communists more often. And those guys told you what they believe the other day. That may sound like rhetoric. It is not, because one of the leaders of the Democratic Socialists of America stood up at their big meeting the other day and said from the platform, from the podium, our goal is communism, quote unquote, and the crowd cheered. So that's what we're fighting now. It is not 1985.
Oh, yes. Hassan Piker loves to wear his Mao Zedong outfits. And we have Bill Maher now, who might be voting for J.D. Vance. So we'll watch that closely. Rod, stick with us. We'll take a quick break here on the Jenny Beth Show and see you back here in a moment.
You are the grassroots of America. You love this country. When you love something, really love it, the news doesn't just inform you, it fires you up. And you find yourself asking, how can I make a difference? That is exactly what this show is built to answer. Never, ever, ever, ever give up. We owe it to every American who has ever voted to make America great again. We owe it to our future selves. We owe it to this republic to stand tall, to stay active, and to be smart about how we spend our energy so that we can win. Here on the Jenny Beth Show, we're going to help you do exactly that. Every show, we will break down the news, connect it to first principles, and give you specific, effective ways to take action. Not just outrage, action. And I am so glad you're here on this journey with us to do it. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
Rod, welcome back to the show, and welcome back to all of you, the great patriots watching around the country and around the world. I'm Robert McNeily. As on the Jenny Beth Show, we are focused on bringing common sense, conservatism, a debt-free future, also economic freedom and personal freedom back to the United States of America. I'm joined by Rod Martin. You can follow him at Rod D. Martin, by the way, really tackling all the big issues today. And Rod, you know what I'm really just amazed by is we're talking about socialism and Marxism and all of these folks who are really, at best, as you put it, looking to bring in all of these terrible policies right here to the United States, specifically Washington, D.C. We have a clip, and I like your take from it, of the actual chair from the Democratic Socialists of America talking about their platform and getting rid of the United States Senate.
Thank you for that comment. So part of what you said, for example, let's start with abolishing the Senate. The Senate is a very undemocratic institution. I talked a bit about democracy, small d democracy, and that's really important to us. We want democratic representation of all people who live in this country. So the Senate represents, it's 2 senators per state, and it's very undemocratic at a basic level because a state with a small population has the same representation as a state that has 500,000 people against the same representation as a state that has 40 million people, like California does, or New York State, or Texas, or Florida, which are the most populated states in the country, but they have the same representation as a much smaller population. So we do believe that government should be proportional to the population. And that's a very basic core principle. So the House of Representatives is more democratic that way. And we just don't see the point of the Senate. Historically, it was meant to serve very wealthy people who owned a lot of land. And that's still a system that we have today. And it's something we would change. We would expand what the House of Representatives does and make it more actually representative of people who live in this country.
So would you like to abolish the Senate?
That's part of our platform, and we don't think that's extreme. We think it's a change that would help make this country more democratic.
So, Rod, should we get rid of the U.S. Senate?
Well, it's not just extreme. It would have been considered crazy talk among Democrats not long ago. So what you see reflected here is a really fundamentally different worldview from that which we have had in America for the last 250 years, which is that we are a federation of sovereign states that actually get to kind of do their own thing as long as they stay within certain boundaries. And the federal government is a government of limited powers, enumerated powers, and can only stick to those things. Now, the Democrats have been eroding that for a century. So that part isn't new. But what you hear from the socialists, the actual socialists, this guy calls himself a socialist. What you hear from them is a very different view, which is that the entire country should be ruled from a distant capital on the Potomac with very little local say over anything, unless, of course, there's a Republican president and then they all start screaming states' rights. But they want a unitary system. They want to dismantle the federalist system that our founding fathers gave us. The founding fathers didn't do that idly. What they were trying to do, looking back at history, they saw that large countries that were ruled as unitary states from the center became tyrannical very quickly. There had never been a successful republic where you had a large expanse of land. And the Roman Republic is superficially an exception, but not really, because you didn't really have a republic outside of the immediate environs of central Italy. So the founders looked at this and said, look, we want freedom, and we are Christians. In case you missed that detail, we are the children of the Great Awakening. We also like the Enlightenment, but we are the children of the Great Awakening. And what we want is to recognize that man is fallen, that he is imperfect, that as a result of that, if any group of people gets enough power, they will always use it to club all the others into submission. So we want to diversify that power as broadly as possible. So they've got local governments, they've got state governments. Our state governments have two houses, except in Nebraska, which is weird. We have different branches of government at the federal level. We have different means of electing different federal officials so that every possible constituency is represented well and can counterbalance each other so that you don't devolve into the kind of political violence that the left increasingly engages in, doesn't just advocate, engages in. The entire idea of the left is that they are going to take absolute power and they are going to mold humanity in the direction they wish it to go. The new Soviet man was Stalin's formulation. Guiding human evolution, you heard from a lot of the early socialists. Okay, well, that's one way to look at it. I think America's been the most successful country in the history of the world because of the way it was set up, and we should fight to preserve that. But yeah, he's engaging in crazy talk. Bill Clinton would have been horrified by that not very long ago.
Yes, the third way policies of Bill Clinton way out the window for the Democrat left. But I think about this a lot, Rod, as we're celebrating our amazing 250th anniversary. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Other constitutions, other documents promise those rights. Our founders said, no, these are unalienable. They come from God, and they took the best of ancient societies from Athens to Rome, even Jerusalem and other ancient civilizations, and thought under constitutional republicanism, of course, not the party, but the law, the rule of law and order, that we're all equal under that law. This can bring many different ideas together, and one that was not under the bounds and binds of a constitutional monarchy. So Rod Martin, thank you so much, CEO and founder of Martin Capital. That was a lot of ground for us to cover today, but you make it make sense. One of the best out there. Again, Rod Martin, thank you so much. You can follow him at Rod D. Martin. And thank you so much for coming on the Jenny Beth Show.
Thank you.
Now we're going to take a short break and then wrap up the show with a few thoughts I want to share with you, so stay with us. Welcome back. Before we close today, one thing for you at home. Jenny Beth is in Washington, D.C. right now, and for one reason. That reason being as she led this show, the Save America Act, the idea that only American citizens should decide American elections. Common sense, right? 50 senators already agree on this. And the only thing standing in the way is a procedural wall and a handful of votes. So do the one thing that actually moves this. Call that Capitol switchboard 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. Ask for both of your senators, Republican and Democrat. Tell them to bring the House-passed Save America Act, the Citizenship to Vote bill, to a vote before they leave town this week. They are listening this week. In a way, they will not be listening in September, especially after that August recess. So make time this afternoon and make that call. And let me leave you with something good today, because it was too good of a week not to reflect on the World Cup. And over the weekend, the eyes of the world coming to America, hosting the World Cup final on American soil from every corner of the globe, filling up a stadium just outside of New York City. Yes, at MetLife, singing, waving flags, and celebrating together in a summer with a lot of hard news. There was something worth remembering in that picture, even President Trump commenting on the success of FIFA. People still want to come here. They still want to look to America. And the thing that makes them look here is freedom, opportunity, a nation of citizens who govern themselves. That's exactly what Jenny Beth is in Washington fighting to protect. And one of the most legendary actors, Tom Cruise, perfectly summing up the game of soccer, otherwise known around the world as football, that truly brought the nations together to celebrate our common humanity. Well said, Mr. Cruise. If you like today's conversation, go watch the episode from yesterday as well. It really ties it together. China got 220 million American voter files and the Save America Act vote with Phil Kerpen. A great conversation. And this is a perfect companion to everything we talked about today and the national security issue that should be on the mind of every single American. Well, that's our show for Tuesday. For Jenny Beth Martin, I'm Robert McNeily. Thank you for spending part of your day with us, and make that phone call. Don't forget to take care of the people you love, and we will see you right back here tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern. May God bless you and yours, and always God bless the United States of America.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who care about liberty and the Constitution. You can find this and other episodes at jennybethshow.com, as well as Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, X, and your favorite podcast platform.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.